Welcome to Family Lifestyles. I'm Lynn Blankenship, the Extension Agent for Family and Consumer Sciences Education in Metcalfe County. And today we have a special guest. We are joined by Mason Crawford, who is the new West Region Kentucky State University Agriculture and Natural Resources Coordinator and Area Agriculture Agent. Welcome, Mason.
Good morning.
We're super happy to have Mason. He's an award-winning agent. In 2022, Mason was the recipient of the Kentucky Association of State Extension Professionals Extension Associate of the Year for Kentucky State University and the 2022 Association of Extension Administrators Integrated Poster winner at the National 1890 Institution Conference. Mason, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you for including me. I think this may be one of the first times that Kentucky State University has been involved with this program.
It is. I'm so happy to have you here.
But my personal background, I began my academic professional career in the secondary schools. I was an agriculture teacher at first LaRue County High School, and then I founded the agriculture program at John Hardin High School in Elizabethtown. After that, then I moved out of state, went to Tennessee, not too far south of here, and started a landscaping company. So I did some sustainable type landscape design, both residential, commercial, that type of thing. Did some sustainability consulting for the green industry. Did some work with vertical axis wind turbines, solar arrays, and that type of thing, and educational components primarily for companies dealing with that. And then 2016, I moved back to Kentucky and began my career with Cooperative Extension.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. So today, Mason is going to share with us his extensive knowledge about backyard poultry. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we're going to cover a broad array of things. So you'll see that we have incubators, meat, eggs, the poultry standards. We'll be making reference to many of these different things throughout the segments that we do today. And then even my background began even before a professional career. So just to show I have a little background in poultry beyond that of academic training, when I was in high school, even before that as a young child, my grandfather fell ill, so I first took over his flock and cared for those while he recovered. So my first experience was raising dual-purpose chickens and helping gather the eggs. And from that point, I expanded and started with incubation and breeding. Loved genetics, so I was involved in some rudimentary genetic studies by doing crossbreeding programs, and then I raised purebreds and showed those around the country as well. That led me, when I was in high school, I was an FFA member and was one of the national finalists in poultry production long before Kentucky was a premier producer of poultry products.
Excellent. So we are going to get a lot of knowledge from you today about this topic, and this is super timely. During COVID, so many people decided to start raising poultry, and we have so many more backyard flocks now than we had prior.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we want to touch on, both from small-scale producer, which is one of Kentucky State University's primary emphasis, is working with underserved populations, limited resource farmers, and small-scale producers. So we'll talk about niche markets that have emerged, and due in part to COVID, has really expanded, and then for just the backyard hobbyist. We discussed before filming that was a big resurgence of people having them in their backyards, and there's some criteria that you need to know about, and we'll touch on those later in the segment as well.
Awesome. So the next thing we're going to discuss is the importance of the poultry industry in Kentucky.
Yes. So the poultry industry in Kentucky is actually much more prevalent than most people know. The broiler industry has really emerged as a primary source of income within the agricultural community. Most years, it's over $1 billion industry in Kentucky. It's actually the single largest most years for contributing to the agricultural economy. There was a little slack off of that during 2020 and even prior to that, and a big part of that had to do with some health issues with the avian bird flu. We had some flooding recently that made it drop down to number 2, but recent projections show that for 2022 it will probably emerge as either regain its top title or be the #2 producer and approaching, if not exceeding, the $1 billion contribution to Kentucky's economy.
Everybody loves chicken. And eggs are such a great source of protein. You know, when you can take that expense off your grocery bill by having a backyard flock, that is probably a significant contribution.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
your food budget.
And just the joy of raising the animals and knowing that the eggs are fresh, knowing what you put into them so that there's no question about what they've been fed or how they've been cared for. And, you know, it gets back to that bit of sustainability that we're all seem to be working toward.
Yeah, excellent. And some of those niche markets that you were talking about for small scale farmers?
Yes, a lot of times the large scale producers, the Purdue, and no criticism of those because they are the mainstay that contributes to not just that company but others that contribute to that $1 billion to Kentucky's economy. But the small scale producer sells usually directly to the consumer, not just using a middleman. Now sometimes there are some wholesome food markets or groups like that, farmers markets, where there might be a middleman that's involved with the process, but most of the time it's direct to the consumer. So the farmer is getting a greater, or the backyard hobbyist is getting a greater percentage of the profits rather than someone else taking their cut out of the middle.
Okay, so when we go to our local farmers markets, if you see your poultry producer there, and they're selling the poultry at the farmer's market, what are some of the things to look for?
Absolutely. And on your screen, you'll see a close-up of one of the USDA labels, but that is integral if you are either growing the birds and selling them directly to the consumer. You must have that if you are selling the product. And especially if you are selling to a middle person, that person needs to realize that they need to have gone through either a USDA fully inspected facility that allows for marketing outside of Kentucky, or Kentucky State University actually has a processing unit that allows for producers to learn to do this themselves, their farm, and they get certified, and then they can sell those products within Kentucky and do that work themselves.
Do we have a visual for the contact for that program?
Yes, absolutely. Steve Skelton is the point of contact at Kentucky State University.
Great.
And we'll have that information on the screen as well so that you can reach out to him directly. There will be some training programs coming up in the early spring. And so those dates, if you reach out to either me or to Mr. Skelton, he'll provide those dates for you so you can get your farm or your backyard certified for that type of endeavor.
That's fantastic. And so other opportunities for backyard enthusiasts?
Yeah, the big thing is to be able to produce your own food. And that's where the guidelines are not quite as stringent. So you can learn to do some backyard processing yourself. Of course, you need to use good practices and make sure you know what you're doing, because health and hygiene are always very important whenever you're processing birds. And but you do not have to go to a USDA facility where it usually averages between $3 to $5 per bird to have those processed. And if you can save on that expense, that's money that you are saving in your household budget for protein.
Absolutely. And I have an image of Granny going out into the yard and grabbing a chicken by the head and going like this, breaking its neck, and just dealing with it, and then having a beautiful dinner, you know, as a result of that. So.
And interestingly, there are some of the cooperative extension programs have invested in these home processing kits that allow folks to bring their birds either to the extension office or central locations like high schools and teach the students how to do those. Some other things are some educational opportunities with your kids. So we'll talk about that in one of the upcoming segments with the incubation and embryology.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Mason. And
Absolutely.
we'll be back with 2 more segments with Mason on backyard poultry.
Parkinson's disease affects over 1 million Americans. Join the American Parkinson Disease Association to help ease the burden and find the cure. Visit apdaoptimism.org today to find out how you can help millions live with dignity and optimism.
Whether it is for a small-scale commercial production or just for a hobby enthusiast. Sourcing of your chickens, that's a really important topic.
Absolutely. And how do we get those chickens?
Well, there are many different sources. I'm sure all of us have been out to a farm supply store, whether it be, and I'm just throwing out some examples. Every community, many communities will have small privately owned farm supplies, so I definitely encourage you to support our small businesses. But if not, then the larger chain stores like Tractor Supply Company or Rural King or Southern States, those will routinely get chicks in. Some will have them on a daily basis.
Okay.
Others will get those in on specified times where they specifically advertise their chick days.
Great.
So those are good sources. You can also direct order through the mail. So that is an interesting source. You can go online. In the old days, you would get mailed a catalog. You can still request those paper catalogs if you choose. There are many different hatcheries. Murray McMurray Hatchery has probably the most breeds of any, but there are many different ones. The backs of farm supply magazines will often have those addresses that you can, or email addresses that you can look to, but it's probably easier just to go online and see those types of things today.
And in that scenario, when you get those chicks, they're alive.
They are, and they're
you hope that.
Well, we hope they are. Cold weather is often, the earlier you get them, the greater risk.
Okay.
But the unique thing is that they are less than a day old when they are shipped
incredible.
out. They're put in boxes. That's why they have a minimum through mail order of 25 chicks, or if you're buying in a farm supply store, a minimum of 6 chicks that are necessary, and that just helps keep them warm even on that short trip home from the store to your home. But in the mail especially, they need to have that shared body heat to stay warm. And in addition to that, we also have some local hatcheries here in Kentucky. So you can save some money oftentimes, particularly if you're looking for meat birds. There are a couple of hatcheries in Kentucky, and again, I'm happy to share some of those contact information if folks reach out to me. But you can get the Cornish hybrid meat birds, which are what are primarily raised for our freezers.
Yes.
Because they grow so fast.
But they also lay eggs, don't they?
They can lay eggs, but most of the time, those the Cornish hybrids are bred for meat production. So by the time they are 6 to 8 weeks old, they have already reached their lifespan, and now they will live longer, obviously. But because they are designed and bred to grow so quickly.
A quick turnaround. All that energy is going into meat.
Absolutely. So you can see I brought a sample in here of a chicken breast. These are actually just 2 breasts, and they're weighing in at over 2 pounds. So there were 2 pounds of breast meat from this one bird. And so
and do you know how old that bird was?
That was about an 8-week-old bird.
Okay, that's incredible.
So a very fast turnaround for that. Now, we will talk about feeding. If you're raising the meat birds, then you need to make sure that you provide a meat bird formula. Now, you can have that mixed from your own farm inputs if you raise the corn and soybeans, and you'll need to get the proper minerals, vitamins to be added to it. Or if you get a commercially prepared feed, they will need to be at least that 20 to 22% protein, whereas a lot of chick starters are going to be down in the 18%.
More carbohydrate.
And without that extra protein, then you can experience leg problems and other joint issues, structural problems, because they grow so fast.
And they're not going to probably reach their weight as quickly.
Oh, absolutely
if the feed
not.
Isn't right.
And no one, part of our responsibility in animal husbandry is to meet the nutritional needs and know what our animals need. And if you skimp on feed, you're not only shortchanging yourself, but you're decreasing the quality of life for that animal. And
that makes
especially if you're interested in being a backyard enthusiast, you want to have a healthy and, as much as possible, a happy bird.
Absolutely.
So provide what they need. Now, meat is just one choice. You'll also see we have several dozen eggs here, or at least 1 dozen of eggs here. And these are just starting. My pullets that are about 8 months old are just now starting to lay.
Nice.
So they are what is called a dual purpose breed, so it takes them a little bit longer. Some of the commercial type of laying breeds, usually they are lighter in weight. They have a better feed conversion to produce eggs, but they are very small birds, and there's not much to them when the time comes to put them on the kitchen table. So dual purpose breeds are very popular with home farm type of poultry production. If you're just wanting to raise eggs, then there are some new sex-linked hybrids that are just a little bit larger, but they still start laying at 4 or 4.5 months. I mean, that was unheard of 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Usually it was about a 6-month mark for birds to start laying. So there are so many choices. We're going to have a poster up on the screen. You should be seeing that now, that will show the basic types of birds. You'll have the layers. You'll have those that are raised specifically for eggs. You'll have those that are raised specifically for meat. And then you'll have the ones that are classified as dual purpose. And then a fourth category are those that are for ornamental or just for enjoyment. So they'll
feathers,
have,
like palm.
Top knots are the pom-pom heads, or the feather-legged. Some of them are naked necks. They have no feathers on their necks. Others are silkies that have more like hair rather than feathers. And those are usually for exhibition, but they also are good for laying eggs. Not as many eggs as some of the more traditional breeds, but if you're doing it for fun, have something that you're proud of. And a lot of those are very, very docile, so they make excellent pets for kids.
So if you have a 4-H'er or an FFA child that wants to experiment with show poultry, that's the type of poultry they're going to focus on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we are actually working to design a pen of birds. So a meat bird pen or a pullet pen where you will have 4 birds that are on exhibition. We're going to try to launch that this next summer at select county fairs and possibly even at the state fairs. So that's something to look through with your county agents. We'll hopefully have some information going out across the state.
So there'll be like a project handout that they can just follow along with. So if they're already doing poultry and they're established, they can pick that up pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. That's awesome, Mason. So I think next we're going to talk about incubation.
Yes, we're going to quickly go through and talk about 2 different types of incubators. One that we have here, and we'll have it on the screen as well, is a forced air incubator for chicken eggs, other types of poultry. It's great to have a fan. It keeps the air circulating, and it keeps it at a constant temperature, usually around 99.5 degrees. Still air incubator is slightly different. It's like the one that's over here on this side. It's ideal for reptiles, so if we have any snake or amphibian or even small lizard enthusiast. My son was big into that, so this is one of his incubators that he had bought. You can use those to hatch reptile eggs as well. In that case, the forced air dries those eggs out, so you don't want to have that.
They're like a leathery egg, right?
Right.
Like a snake egg, yeah.
Now, that being said, this is also used for poultry. It's less expensive. One like this is only about $75. One with the electronic thermostat and the forced air, they're about $150. So while you get slightly decreased hatchability with the forced air, with the still air, if you weigh the economics, that may still be a more desirable for you. And then inside this incubator, we have one of the automatic turning trays, which that saves you a great deal of time. Otherwise, it's necessary for you to turn those eggs 2 to 3 times per day so that you can keep them from sticking to the side of the shell.
Okay. So, I think next we're going to talk, about embryology and candling.
Yeah, on the screen you're going to see a picture that shows much of the different types of stages of development. For chickens, it takes 21 days from the time you put it in an incubator until it hatches. So an egg candler here is good because you can actually see while the egg is developing. If you're in a dark environment, you can see the embryo inside the egg. We also have a photo on screen that will show about a 5-day-old chick inside the egg, so you can see the blood vessels developing there.
Very interesting. Okay, so thank you for that, Mason, and we are going to be back for our final segment to learn more about poultry production.
Everyone deserves a decent place to live.
Everyone.
Decent shelter is something we all need to thrive. Through shelter, we empower. Visit Habitat.org to provide help to families like these today.
Welcome back to Family Lifestyles, and we are back to continue our conversation about raising poultry.
Absolutely. In the last segment, we talked about incubation and concluded with the candling process to explain how you can actually see the baby chick inside the egg, which makes a great learning experience for the children. But once they hatch, the need of providing adequate care in a very specific environment does not end.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about brooding, and brooding is simply providing a substitute for the mother hen setting on top of the baby chicks. The most important factor of that is having a warm environment.
Okay.
So there are many different ways of providing that. On the screen, you're going to see one of the GQF commercial style brooders.
Okay.
They're about $200 to $300, depending upon what brand and what elective types of additions you get on that. But it is something that if you're going to be doing this over and over again, it's nice because they have wire bottoms, so you can pull the trays out and dispose of the waste. The chicks stay cleaner, and it's a little bit more efficient because it has a thermostat controlling the temperature. So much like the inside of an incubator, there is a wafer that expands as it heats up.
Okay.
And when it reaches that ideal temperature, which coincidentally is 95 degrees as soon as they come out of the incubator, then it will shut off. So you're only using electricity whenever you need to heat.
Nice.
Now, if you're only going to raise one batch of chicks a year, probably not worth that investment. So you can start with something as simple as the accordion style that's on the screen now.
Okay.
That red kind of polycarbonate type material.
Okay.
The important thing you're going to notice in that picture is that it is not in a square. Most brooders, even the commercial ones, have squares or rectangular in shape, but it's important to block off the corners those first few days. You'll notice in this design that's on the screen, you can see that it's in an accordion or a hexagon shape, so that there is no corner for the birds to pile up in and freeze. They're not exactly rocket scientists, so you need to help them out. Another way that helps with that temperature is to lure them. So the light itself actually lures them to where the heat is.
Okay.
So if you're going with a little bit more of an affordable type of situation, a lamp such as this, a heat lamp, just like you might have seen on other applications growing up, if any of you grew up on a farm. But a red bulb is good, especially if they are a little more aggressive breeds, because cannibalism becomes an issue. They will peck at each other under a really bright light. So a clear 250 watt heat bulb creates a situation where some breeds will actually peck at each other.
Okay.
Now, we're targeting decreasing 5 degrees per week after they hatch. So one way to accomplish that is to continue raising the bulb off of the ground, which decreases the ambient temperature where the chicks are. And eventually, depending upon what the outside temperature is or within the building, you can shift over to just a larger incandescent bulb.
Okay.
Now I'm going to show you a few different types of bulbs because all of us that are trying to be more energy conscious, first we shifted over to the squiggly CFL bulbs.
Yes, we did.
And then we transitioned over to the LED bulbs. Now these are great because they provide just as much light for a fraction of the electrical use. However, they don't produce heat. So it doesn't do much good at all unless you're already at that 70 degree mark, which is your ultimate temperature you want to provide for chicks when there's a few weeks old.
So when you say 70 degrees, you mean ambient temperature?
Ambient temperature.
Out in the environment outside of where the chicks are?
Outside where the chicks are. Of course, if it's 70 degrees ambient temperature outside or hotter, then all you're looking for is a source of light to draw them, to keep them where you want to have
And you're
them at night.
talking about 70 degrees at night.
At night.
During
Anytime
the coldest
during the day.
period of the day.
The coldest period of the day, absolutely.
Good. Let's just clarify, make
Yeah,
sure everyone
absolutely.
understands.
Very good. And that's not for initial. That's when you've been decreasing 5 degrees per week. So your birds are a few weeks old by the time you're getting to that cooler temperature.
It's like hardening off greenhouse plants.
Absolutely.
Before
Very
you put-
similar.
Same thing. You're hardening off your chicks.
So you can eventually shift from the 250 watt heat bulb to maybe a 100 or 150 watt incandescent bulb. And then, depending upon what time of the year it is, you might be able to use one of these other bulbs just as an attraction light, but not providing any heat.
Excellent. Okay, so that was super clear. So what about watering?
Water is very important. Just when especially if you order the chicks from the mail order, they sometimes are up to 3 days old, and they have absorbed that yolk that we saw during the candling process. That was exterior of the body just before they hatch. They absorb it into the body, and it provides enough food and moisture for up to 3 days.
Okay.
But when they come in through the mail, they are hungry and they are thirsty.
Okay.
So very important to dip their beaks in water, but they are also, as we've said, not the brightest of animals. And if you put a pan of water in there, they're just going to pile in, and they're going to get cold and wet, and they're probably going to perish.
Okay.
So fountains will often have just enough area, and there are much smaller ones than this as well. You can start with even like a pint jar and just a very small screw-on, very similar to this.
Yeah.
I just did not have one handy to bring in today. But if you have a large number of birds, the 1 gallon one is fine.
Yeah.
If you have really small birds, or quail or bantams, which are the miniature chickens, then you may want to put pebbles or even sponges inside the area where the water is, so it shortens the amount of water that's in there.
Okay.
So that they don't drown.
So no one drowns. Yeah.
Now, speaking of water, this time of year, even with your adult birds, water is absolutely essential. If a bird goes, like it freezes almost every night these nights.
Right.
And if their water freezes and you're not religious about getting out first daylight and providing them fresh water as soon as they wake up, you can actually interrupt the egg-laying cycle immediately. So it could take up to a week for them to get back into the cycle of producing new eggs. You may not know it the first day because they are already developed and ready to go.
Yeah.
But 3 or 4 days later, they're going to drop off on their laying.
You're not going to have the amount of eggs you need to feed your family.
That's right. And you're paying for the feed, but you're not getting the results.
Right.
So water is just as important as feed.
Absolutely.
So you can actually go to a farm supply store. This is often sold as a pet waterer. Yeah. But if it's an adult bird and you're not having young ones, then you just simply, all it takes is a 110 outlet and plug it in, and it'll keep the water from freezing. So you can have your adult birds with fresh water all winter long.
Yeah, and you don't need to worry about that disruption. What about pastured poultry versus confined poultry?
I know, we talked about this was going to be mainly a pastured poultry discussion. So on the screen, you're going to see one of the hoop houses that it's modeled somewhat like the ones that KSU produces. We work with producers to create these and to pasture our poultry. The nice thing about them, about any chicken tractor as they're phrased, they either have wheels, which kind of gives it the name of the tractor, or they're on skids so that they can be scooted through fresh grass on a regular basis, usually between March and November, when there's actually pasture for them to enjoy. So you're going to decrease your feed bill because they are going to get nutrients not only from the plants that they eat, but also they're going to dig down and they're going to find bugs and grubs and all of those things, just like you said. So you're going to provide a more natural environment, and you're going to see a greater quality of eggs and meat that you are producing because of that. You may wonder why we had a pumpkin on the table all these different segments, but that is to show what some of the things that you can do in the off season when you don't have green pasture for the birds, but you want to provide them some natural types of feeds. You can supplement the commercially prepared rations by taking your table scraps. Chickens are omnivores. They will eat meat, they will eat eggs. I don't advise ever letting them see the egg shell and know that that's where it's coming from. But if you have any types of things like that, you can feed those to your birds.
Okay, so this is all great information to help our families to know how to take care of their birds, and we really appreciate you coming on with us today, Mason, and hopefully you will come back and discuss more about poultry and other
Absolutely.
topics.
So glad to be doing a collaborative work with the University of Kentucky. As you can see from the vintage sign that we have on the table, I love all things vintage. The partnership goes back a long ways. There's a long history of cooperation, but in the western part of the state, we have not had a large presence with KSU. So we're going to close out the segment by showing the new joint logo. That shows collaborative efforts between the University of Kentucky and Kentucky State University.
And we are very happy to have you in Western Kentucky. Thank you for joining us on Family Lifestyles.